I am Christian Grönroos, and this talk is the first part of a series of lectures on principles of service management. And the topic here is what is service and why service business? Meaning, what really is service today? How should it be understood? And secondly, why would a firm or an organization want to be a service business or service firm, regardless of whether the firm is by definition a service firm like a restaurant or bank, or by traditional definitions a manufacturer of goods. As you are going to see, any firm can be a service firm. It's a matter of strategic choice. So that's the topic now. And to begin with, what is service today, first of all? And it's important to realize that it has two different meanings at least. And these are the two meanings that you find in the literature today. The first one is the traditional one that's been in the literature since the 70s. And that is service as an activity, meaning service as what a restaurant is doing or a bank is doing or an educational institution is doing when delivering a service. That is the process that goes on in any classroom or in a bank office or when you interact with an internet bank or in any situations like that. Service as an activity. The other view of service that has emerged in the literature in the last 10 years but has been in the Nordic School literature more or less implicitly, sometimes explicitly, for a number of decades is service as a perspective. And service as perspective on business and marketing means something else than service as an activity. What it means is that how do you look at your customers? How do you want to approach your customers? How are you taking care of your customers? And if you do it in a special way, you do it in a service way. And what this service way is something that will unfold shortly. In the literature, there are terms like service logic to describe service as a perspective. And in much of the literature, it's called service dominant logic. What it means is taking this service-specific perspective on how to manage and how to run the business and its marketing. Now, let's first look at service as an activity. In much of the literature on service as a perspective, it's called a service or services. What I mean that is an activity, whereas service as a perspective is called service. Now, this is confusing. And one has to be somewhat careful when reading literature on this. And also in a number of articles and publications, the difference between these two ways of expressing it, a service, services on one hand, and service on the other hand, isn't there. Although the author means either service as an activity or service as a perspective. So one has to be a little bit careful when reading the current literature. But service as an activity, that's the traditional thing, what you talk about. This is a definition about it. It's fairly long and it can be made much longer. But what it really says is that service as an activity is a process consisting of a number of activities following upon each other. And in these activities, the user, the customer, you and I interact with a number of resources representing the service provider. People, tangible items, products, and other tangible items like documents, or systems of various sorts, IT systems or self-service systems or any type of systems. And there may be other resources as well that the customer as a user is interacting with. And of course, the aim of all this is to fulfill the needs and requirements of the customer. So this is service as an activity. And key characteristics here are that services are processes, and that is the most important characteristic of service as an activity. And service is a process. And if you think about the physical product, like, for example, this mug here, it's a thing. It exists here and now. But service, like this talk here, doesn't exist here and now. It develops all the time for the time I am talking here. As with any service like that, it is something that goes on until it comes till the end, when the customer should have achieved any type of goal he or she or an organization has. So important here is to remember that services are processes, and managing processes is something quite different, as it turns out, as compared to managing things, physical items, products. And that's what makes service management different, and also to some extent more problematic than traditional management of physical products. Now, there are other characteristics of services as activities. The two most important here is that services are at least partly produced and consumed simultaneously, meaning that the service provider, some resources of the service provider and the customer meet, interact, and influence each other, partly, not totally. Now, in an educational system, in a classroom, at least we are there, the teacher and the students. And there may be interactions, and probably normally are interactions going on. But it could be other types of interactions as well. I mentioned the internet bank or self-service systems, for example, where we interact with various types of non-human resources. Then part of the service is not produced in interaction with the customer. In an educational system, for example, a student will probably read some literature beforehand or afterhand. Now, there the student is on his or her own. So, but they're still part of the service process. And this goes for all types of services. The third important characteristic follows from the second, and that is the customer participates in the service process to some extent. And if the customer cannot participate in the process, doesn't know what to do, doesn't know what the information to give, doesn't know what to do, the service will not function very well for the customer. If we don't know how to handle a self-service check-in machine at the airport, we're going to be in trouble. Just to give an example. And that means that customers need to know, or by the service provider be helped to participate in the service process. And of course, on the airports, the check-in machines there, very many passengers do not know really how to use it or cannot really use it properly. And the airports have had to put in people there who are, as consultants, helping passengers to check in. Now, in the literature, you find other ways of characterizing services. There's something called the IHIP, which is in all of the literature. Now, some of this is here, and there's something else. Now, there's a lot of criticism about the IHIPs, and I won't go into that now. But this is the way within the Nordic School research tradition services have been characterized, and that seems to hold very well, that these are really the key important aspects. Now, then look at service as a perspective on business, service logic. It's multifaceted, which is important. There is a service logic for the customer, and there is a service logic for the service provider. And that has to be kept in mind. So if we look at the provider service logic first, it can be expressed in this way, that service is to facilitate and support someone's practices, that is, processes, activities, what one does and need to do physically and mentally, in a way that contributes to this person's or organization's value creation. meaning that the person feels that I'm getting where I want to get. I achieve some goals I think are important for me right now. So for the service provider, it's important to make sure that if we want to apply a service logic, whatever we do will aim at supporting and customers just everyday, supporting customers just everyday practices, process activities, in a way that makes the customer feel, as it said in the literature, feel better off. That's value has been created. Meaning the customer feels that this helped me to move towards whatever goal I feel I have. So that is service from a provider perspective. Now, what it means is that, for example, a service firm would apply knowledge it has on various types of resources. And the result of this is a process which will, as this description says, support the customer's practices in a way that will contribute to this customer's value creation. But then we have a customer service logic. What are we as consumers really doing when we are using whatever we have bought or got in some other way? What we are doing really is that we put this, what we get, into our own process of consuming, of using. So the definition here is that service is what a customer experiences when he or she or an organization integrates resources that have been bought with other available resources and then applies skills held by this person or this organization. That's what service from the customer point of view. Whatever we are consuming, we consume as service because we put it into the process of trying to use it. I'm using this gadget here to move the slides. Now, what I'm doing is I'm taking this physical product and I apply a customer service logic on it because I'm using it during the process of this talk to move the slides, to support the message. So whatever we are using, be that physical product or be that a service activity, we use as service, as it's often said in the literature these days. Because what we are doing is that we put any resource we bought into a process and by doing that, taking actions and then perhaps achieve the goals we have, well or less well, being better off or less better off, and in the worst case, being worse off and in the beginning. And we add other resources to that. For example, when we want to prepare a meal in the evening, and we buy some meat, some vegetables, and then we go home and prepare the meal. Now we need to add other resources as well. We need spices, and some of us will need a cookbook, and then we apply the skills we have on all this, and in the process of cooking the meal, we consume whatever we have bought, and in the end, we perhaps achieve the goals of having a nice time and feel content even after having the meal. So that's what service is as a logic from the consumer point of view. And the idea here is, of course, now to make these two meet so that the service provider, the firm or any institution or organization or even a person, will perform in a way that as well as possible helps the customer to put whatever the customer gets from the firm or the organization into his, her, or the organization's own processes and practices. And by doing that, being able to achieve goals, create value for himself or herself, or however we choose to explain this or put this. So that's the service as a perspective. Let's take two cases to demonstrate this, because you may have noticed that in the definition of the provider service logic, there was a short notice that resources could be services, could be physical products, could be information, could be anything. So this means that the service logic or service as perspective doesn't relate only to providing services, service activities. It could also relate to providing physical products or combinations of services and physical products. So let's take a case. The first one is about a service activity. The other one is of a product manufacturing. It's a firm that offers lift services. It's fairly big, and at the time of this case, which is some time ago, they had some problems because providing services on lifts, meaning maintenance and repair services, was always 50% of turnover already then. Today it's much more. And the problem was that customers cancelled the agreements with the firm. Customers disappeared. Customers were lost. And that was coming close to becoming a profitability problem. So the first action was done then, because this is a problem. We need to know, why do we lose customers? And the first action was a survey, a traditional survey made, as one firms and we as often do as researchers as well. And often it turns out a survey is not the right thing to gather information, to really learn something. And it turned out so in this way, in this case as well. Because the customers said, when they answered pre-asked questions, that's how a survey is. You ask questions and you have scales there, and the customer answers. And the key questions related to, what do you feel about the quality of the lift or elevator service? And the other thing is, what do you think about the price? And the answer was quite clearly, we think the quality is low and the price is high. Now this created considerable confusion in the project group, because this was a big firm and they knew we have the best resources on the market. The best resource on this market. We have best trained service technicians, and we have the largest assortment of spare parts and instruments, machinery and everything required. Why is this? We can't have low quality in our service. And then the question was what to do. Now if you act upon this information, you would probably think that customers don't understand how good our quality is, and you might go into marketing and say, let's increase the marketing budget, let's communicate with the customers more, and just tell them that you don't understand how good our service is. Now this is something you can do when the customers don't understand. But when the customers understand something, you cannot tell them that they are stupid. It's saying that the quality is good, although you say it's bad in this case. Then you have to look at the thing differently and say, hey, there is a real problem. And clearly here is a real problem. So the second action was to do a qualitative study. A qualitative study of the problem detection type, meaning try to really find out what is the problem. And just one question was asked of 100 of the lost customers. There was various types of buildings here, so they tried to find the person in these buildings, residential buildings, office buildings, buildings in the public sector like schools, universities, hospitals and so forth, to find out what really is the problem. And the question was just this: what mistakes are we doing? It was phrased differently in the discussion with different respondents here, but the idea was to create a real conversation about what's really gone wrong here, because you cancelled the agreement with us and stopped using our services. And the results were astonishing. Here are the results. Now look first at the first line here. The customer said, everybody said, no problems with actual repair and maintenance of lifts, elevators. You can do it. I mean, when you've been there and done the maintenance work, the lifts will work. Or if there has been a breakdown and when you come to repair, it works after that. You can repair. Great. Quality, good. However, if we continue looking at the list here, we realize that maybe quality is not that good after all. Because what the people said, the customers said, was that we have all sorts of problems with your service technicians, with your systems, and with your way of performing, with your flexibility or lack of flexibility, with your communication with us, or rather lack of communication. Meaning the service technicians, they really don't want to answer any questions. When we want to, it's clear, people will ask, the lift is fine now, but do you see any risk it will break down in the near future? But the service technician wasn't prepared to answer any questions like that. They were focusing on repairing the lift or maintaining the lift, meaning normal maintenance service to make sure that it doesn't break down. And there were systems, they left the job in the middle sometimes, quite often. Now the reason was, according to respondents, that they had taken an extra coffee break probably. Well, that was not the real reason. The real reason was they had two small vans. And quite often they just had to get a spare part or even sometimes some instrument from a depot somewhere to continue doing the work. But they had no means of informing the people around the lift that we're away for a good reason. So that's why people, the customers, people using the lift would feel that they're probably lazy, they're probably not doing their job properly. And all sorts of things were coming up like this onto the surface in these conversations. And the conclusion is then, of course, which the project group realized very quickly, that there is a problem with quality. There certainly is a problem with quality, but it's different. It's not what we thought originally. So the question is then, what was the problem? What can we learn from this case? What did the project group and what did the firm learn from this case? And by the way, this firm put in huge efforts into changing the situation and managed to get customer backs, managed to become service-oriented business, and has been done very well after this. But what we can learn basically is that although the firm offered services, service activities, repairing and maintaining lifts, elevators, it was operating in a product-oriented way, focusing on the outcome only, meaning it's operated as a product business. They were focused on the lifts, and they were focused on making the lifts function. They were not focusing on the customer, not focusing on the people that needed to use the lifts. So they were product-oriented. They were not customer-oriented because they didn't focus on the process of maintaining and repairing the lifts. And it created all these problems they had. Customers felt that quality is low, although technically it's very good, but other aspects just creates problems for us. So in the final analysis, we consider the quality low. Now let's take another case. This is a sound recording equipment case, loudspeakers and other sound recording equipment. It's a manufacturing firm. It's a real product manufacturer. They don't even provide systems for sound recording, just the products. And a few years back, the founder and chairman of the board was asked, what's the reason for the firm's success? And the answer was, there's no secret. If the customers are satisfied with the product and with the way the firm operates, the firm will be successful. Now, what he says is, the products have to be so good that the customers are satisfied with it, but that's not enough. The process of having something to do with the customers, the process is of communicating, delivering, upgrading, suggesting new solutions, the process of how do you invoice your customers, for example, how do you handle mistakes, problems, if there's happen to be any quality problem with some loudspeaker, how do you handle that? That's what is important. And the firm's customers would probably answer this. I have really done no study about this, but this quite clearly is what customers would say, that we like your way of approaching us, and we like the way you facilitate our processes and our number of processes. And on top of that, we appreciate your high quality products as well. And this firm has high quality products, and the price is very, very high, and they are globally very successful. So what can be learned from this case? And why does it relate to the previous case? Well, we can learn that although the firm offers products, it's operating in a service-oriented way, focusing on the processes. Of course, making sure that the outcome, which in this case is related to the products, the loudspeakers, that they have a good enough, in this case very high quality. So in short, this firm operates like a service business, although it is a pure product manufacturer. So what's important to realize here is that it depends on how you operate, how you perform your business, whether you are a service business or not. Meaning that the type of resources required to be a service business, a firm that operates according to a service perspective, is not important. It can be physical products, it can be service activities, it can be information, it can be anything, or combinations of anything. It's the perspective you take, the perspective on the business and the perspective on how to approach the customers in the marketplace or market space that's important. So this is the key question, which means that any firm can be a service business. Any firm can be a service business. It's a strategic choice. An important thing here to observe is strategic choice. There must be a high-level decision in any firm and organization that we want to think and plan and operate in a service-oriented way. We want to be a service business. And this doesn't only mean commercial businesses, this goes for any organization in the public sector or third sector as well. The other thing of importance here is that the choice, yes, must be followed up by processes that changes the organization. And there's a lot of those changes needed, and in the first case I mentioned here, I said they did a lot of things. Education, communication, buying larger vans, by the way, and changing their ways of taking on customers, and all those sorts of things were done. A lot of support activities were created, but I won't go into any details there. But the aim with all that was to create an attitude of mind among the people in the organization. An attitude of mind that already existed in the second case, the loudspeaker case. And this attitude of mind can be called service culture. And service culture, what it in short means that the most important thing people think about is service, meaning how do we support and facilitate with whatever we are doing, whatever I am doing in my role right now. How do we support and facilitate any given customer's practices, processes, activities in a way that helps them become better off, helps them create value for themselves. That's service culture in short. These are two basic requirements, but the first is easy in a way, the strategic choice, because that can be made after an intellectual process and some analysis of the market, if managers on a high level are capable of thinking in that way and think this is important for their success on the marketplace, of course. The other issue, creating a service culture, is much more demanding and takes much more time, and it's much more even problematic, but very achievable. So coming to another ultimate conclusion here, how is service experienced by the customers? Because we need to know that to understand how to take a service perspective. How do customers perceive service? So the first case, by the way, led to this theoretical model that turns out to be very practical. And there's nothing more practical than a good theory. And this really has showed it. What it says is, let's look at quality from the customer's, the user's perspective. What do we see then? Not quality from our internal processes point of view. because then we only see technical issues, technical specifications of the physical product or of the service activity, or we put in technical specification in any information we provide customers with, and so forth. So what do we see looking at quality as perceived quality, quality perceived by the customers? We see two dimensions. We see customers, yes, paying attention to the technical quality, meaning what they get. The lift is repaired and works. The loudspeaker functions. But what customers also see is what is called functional quality, relating to the process of taking care of the customer. Now, in the lift elevator maintenance case, that would be how are we communicating with the customers that might ask questions? How do we explain to customers what we are doing and when we are doing things that doesn't look really logical, leaving the job all of a sudden for some reason? And how are we flexible in assigning jobs to various customers that need to have their lifts maintained during a certain period of time? Normally in many countries lifts have to be maintained once a month, and that's one of these lift service issues. Then the other thing, repairs when breakdowns take place. So how does the process move forward? And that's the how. And if we look at what's behind this, well, the technical quality, the what the customer gets, that's the outcome of the process. The lift functions or the loudspeaker functions. The functional quality is a function of various elements in the process, like people's attitudes and behaviors, accessibility to people and to systems, punctuality in the way the job's done, trustworthiness. Can we trust this firm, the people, their systems? Servicescape, meaning the environment around the service process. How does it look when service is done on a lift, for example? How does it look when a loudspeaker or number of loudspeakers are delivered? How does the delivery truck look like? How do the people look like? How does the package look? The servicescape, the surrounding around the process. And then capability to take care of problems that from time to time do occur, however good we are. Problems occur. Late deliveries, or an IT system doesn't function, or some service employee shows up a little bit too late, or makes a real mistake, or has a bad day, or for any reason. And how do we cope with that? That's called service recovery, by the way, in the literature. Now, it turns out that, as these both cases show, and a lot of research that's been done over the years reinforces, and that technical quality has to be good enough for customers to perceive good quality. But what counts is functional quality. It's the functional quality that determines whether the customer wants to continue doing business with the service provider or any firm. It's the functional quality that determines. So if the functional quality is low, we can be however good at technical quality and we still have problems with keeping the customers and getting the price we want. Of course, there are exceptions. There are situations where the technical quality is so interesting or so important for a given customer that they do not care very much about the process. And then, of course, functional quality is less important here. Surgery in a hospital, for example, could be like this. Or, going a few years back, iPhones were certainly like that. Standing in line and waiting to be there to buy it during the first hour. Process awful, but I need to have this iPhone number next. And if the situation is that and customers' interests are so much about, relating to the technical quality, yes, that's fine. Then, but in a normal situation, 99 or 999 cases out of the 100 or 1,000, probably more the latter than the first, it goes like this. Technical quality has to be good enough, but we compete with functional quality because it's that what determines whether customers will consider total quality good enough for them to continue buying from us. So that's a second conclusion here. Now, the ultimate conclusion is then, from the customer's point of view, what's really going on in the marketplace and also in the market space when buying on the internet, for example, or using services, bank services, anything on the internet. Well, what goes on in the market space and the marketplace? From any customer's point of view, what's really going on there? And my answer is that in the marketplace, there is only service. There's nothing else than service in any marketplace or any market space. From the customer's point of view, the firm may choose to look at it differently, and so many firms do and have problems. Now, the loudspeaker case, the firm there clearly had chosen to look at the market as something where there is service from the point of view of their customers. The lift case looked at the customers as there's product on the market, the product, a repaired or maintained lift, and the process uninteresting for the customer. The loudspeaker case, good result. The lift maintenance case, bad result. Because there are those in the marketplace or market space that can need support to get done what they want to have done. And there are those who have the resources and knowledge, information, processes available, or can create networks with which they can do whatever they ought to do in order to support and facilitate the customers. So from the customer's point, there's only service in the marketplace. We may not as consumers think like this, but we certainly act like this, and we certainly have these attitudes. Except again for those cases where the technical quality is for some reason so interesting or so important for us that the process is of marginal or sometimes even no importance. But that are really marginal situations. So we'd better think like this. In the marketplace, according to the customers, there's only service. So we'd better provide service. We better adopt a service logic, a service perspective of our business. Now, of course, you can manage with a non-service perspective, a goods perspective, provided that your customers, your segments of customers, are not interested in the process. But if they are interested in the process, you'd better rethink, and you better become a service business. And that's why, to answer the second question on the title slide, it's a good idea to be a service business. You see, customers think that firms are either good, mediocre, or bad service businesses, regardless of whatever we provide. I like this piece of product with which I move slides because it's easy to use and I don't have to remember to put it on. There's another type also. It's here in this package where you have to remember first to put it on there, otherwise it doesn't work. And it turns out that I very often don't remember, and I wonder, well, doesn't it work? And after a while I realize, yes, this was the other type. So this is, according to me, good service, this product, whereas the other one is mediocre service, because it has, to me, a quite unnecessary technical issue, a technical aspect there. You have to put it on when you want to start using. That's to give an example. How are we perceiving products as either good service or mediocre or bad service? And we perceive everything like that. And organizations in business-to-business markets, people there perceive in the same way. So it is a good idea to be a service business. But unless the market situation requires something else. Now, firms must learn then how to not only deliver resources such as physical products or service activities delivered as a resource that very many service firms do. And instead, firms must be prepared to really support and facilitate the customers' practices with their resources, physical products, service activities, information. And in that way, make sure the customers perceive that what the firm's doing is considered good service and not mediocre or bad service. Now, then we are at the end of this talk about why service business and what really is service. Thank you.